mani padme hum, mani padme hum, mani padme hum, mani padme hum, mani padme hum.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Today, that thing, also, Peche, man, nicht so nicht in Sarwa, nicht so nicht, Cheddar no one the wrong same. Singing do ne, do be taton te. Tini hin sungzin semanam, Yilamiji, Jasela is.
So today we are on the 22nd of the 37 verses. So verse number 22 reads, appearances are one's own mind. From the beginning, mind's nature is free from the extremes of elaboration. Knowing this, not to engage the mind in subject-object duality is the Bodhisattva's practice. So an alternate translation, it reads, the way things appear are one's own mind. From the beginning, that very mind has been free from elaborated extremes. Knowing just that, not to create in the mind the signs of grasped at and grasping is the Bodhisattva's practice.
Okay, that day, that Chimbori, that you don't have a change same Gombe Kala, change of same thing, Anthony, Jita Gunzo, change of same say, Tantini, that when a Gunzo change of same de la Katan, Kondson Simbari, Tinditini, and Mumbatan Juba say, Tigana Yiki, Tinida Tandandi, Tontam change of Simba say, or that tea.
So this is a very important verse that is really touching upon the ultimate bodhicitta, or absolute bodhicitta. So yesterday, or in the sessions prior, or the prior Sundays to this one, we talked about bodhicitta and the different classifications of bodhicitta. So there's the relative bodhicitta, and then within the category of the relative bodhicitta, you have both aspiration bodhicitta and application bodhicitta. And then so you have the ultimate bodhicitta, or absolute bodhicitta. So this verse is really dealing with the ultimate bodhicitta, the absolute bodhicitta.
That is that's all Carson the Chetar now under the rank same song at that. That is one of them, Barawa. Titangato Yamla Majivi can wonder what is some mean at me. March Yulata. Rank Sam Tachi Majiva to Yulatini, Jitachi, Yutela, Tini, not to judge, or Util Pena, use some Bolatini, not to Chaba. Yulic Tanga to Samboji Godo, some Chihula to Yore. Tigana Yike, Ta, Dangwing was on the Tambinata, Utila Yapumendo, some chitini. Utility that never saw ke some of the tangu or
So as it says, appearances, all appearances are one's own mind, or the way things appear are one's own mind. So this is really true. For those who do not practice, it really, or those who are not practitioners, then this is something that is that goes unrecognized. And so the majority, generally speaking, those who are not practitioners, are always looking outside of oneself. They're always sort of looking at the outer objects that appear, and then they're judging the qualities of those outer objects, saying this is a good object or this is a bad object. And so then if an object is deemed good or desirable, then attachment to that object arises. And so we think, oh, I need these good or positive things, these positive attributes and objects in my life. And so we try to accomplish them. We try to gather them, thinking that their quality is inherent in the outer objects themselves. Or, you know, on the contrary, we judge outer objects as negative or undesirable. We deem them as undesirable, and we think those objects are not any good. And so we try to avoid them, or we try to get rid of them.
어떻게 다 기타가 저 군조업 경우네 정다 relative truth relative 뭐 대비는 다 기타 지유요와 지유매와 서요 말이 지유들한테는 맞아 지 롱반도 이미나 고 롱바 안가히 롱바 약보요와 가히 롱바 약보매와 그가나 이다 가히 사장가히 토랑 윤보요와 가히양 양나 차와 치에다 양나 배나 베kambo 다 근데 여다 건담다 요르와 이내야 다직 통담배 경고를 섬는 빵비나 지 파이게 유튜브 참말할 때네 진리제게 딱 봐당 템베키랑지 톱데 요 말이라 그가 나기 쭉 가서나 지 유게 상년 진년디 고 술라레디오레 슬라비나 셈레 조랑 나와데 마토베게 지 추유레베 데마토데와지 요 말레스 텐데 조 가서나 마토 나게 셈티기 때문에 지 나조틀 때네 때문에 나조 지 상보다 년바다 지 약보다 두보다 어다 텐데 제게다고 넘바나 저지 중요하디 그 셈기 때문에 중요해서
So from the perspective of the relative truth, this isn't to say that there aren't outer appearances that arise that are existent or manifest on the relative level. So for instance, obviously there are, you know, for instance, environments or places with a different characteristics. So for instance, some places, you know, are very dry and barren with a lot of heat. And, you know, others places are very, you know, very different varieties, all sorts of outer environments and objects appear. So it is that they exist on the one hand, they appear as they, or these appearances aren't completely sort of just projections of the mind, but on an ultimate level, they really are projections of the mind. They don't have any like a sort of permanent, truly existent, substantial nature, you know, from their own side. So on an ultimate level, they don't really exist, or they don't exist in a sort of truly substantial way. And so, and then also when it comes to the designation of those outer objects as either good or bad or positive or negative, that all of those judgments really come only from the mind. So these qualities actually, or these attributes really have nothing to do with the objects themselves. It really has everything to do with the perception of the mind or the designation of the mind. And so whatever appears and is apprehended by the mind is to a large extent created by the mind based on those projections, based on those judgments that we hold, that generally can be broken down into the two categories of positive or desirable, or negative or undesirable. And so this desirable and undesirable really lies exclusively within the designation of the mind. And so that that interpretation, or that sort of imputation that we place upon outer objects is really nothing other than the designations or the projections of one's own mind.
Tati ko je nga so ta tsame hengre ta hin ji bi na tene chi yule no yungu yo na tene ko medya sambe ke chi na wa de ko chi pa ji chang na go ro wa tenang yo ma de tene ji nga so chi yu no sam no ta na ga hi pe yu ning jo sto sam gre ga hi yu ning jo man do sam gre ga na yi ke da ji nga so cha la do wa interesting though, and jala na wina that and the business is okay. Kanjung manjung suyo ro pen jala. Pen na do ta ji tulon do wina pen kudung do wina ta kudung de kanjung manjung suyo ro ta pen dam menda pen don dam menda sotan dam menda. Tindu ta konso ke tindu ta gahi ke ji subtate ko ya bodo zamgre gahi a du bodo zamgre kakina ta ko mu ke tindi je ke ko ji 파이게 샘 람다 요위 좀 센터를 때네 되네 직다 나 오브젝트도 어떻게 중국어 와 되네 되네 지 유라 많이 봐대 난 샘게 되게 차대도 와 되네가 내가 나 이게 딱 아주 쭉 갈세나 진짜 인바데 하고 봐야 돼 백해칭 보러 와 양고락 파트 가서 추년년 집이 내가라 되네지 배나 나와 솔라티네 나와 타바다 나와 마다와 용구요데 텐디 반당가서 조 상하게 냠는 진행도 소이나 되네지 나시 타바람 좀 지지 나신 시바 지다지 가르 남기요나 그러와 가르 출구요나 가르 고구요나 와다 텐디제데 지 타베 나와 텐디지 좀이나 깨당가도다 리더 코랑케 샘로지다 차디거리 다른 나왔다 이런 셈이 이나양 그 셈디야 나와대요 그 나와대고 딱배랑 이 말와 왜냐면이게 강사직 섬노 땅비나 주념을 맞인게 엔도지게 섬노 땅비나 당보지 나와도 참마 두번도 출구요리 당가야 지 가리나 만들되버도 출구요리 변도 차샤비나 참는 것도 되게 연구도와 룽반디나 룽반디 약보면도 세안하고 되네 지 bombo이나 bom보 약보면도 세안하고 되네 사자나 사자 약보면도 세안하고 다지 고양 근데 진에 가서보다 지 네거티브 사이드 때 뭐보다 되는지 힘이네요 고 칼레야 야 컴퓨터지 고 샘테지 나와대 저와 탭지 되네 야 고지 포지티브 톤으로야 어떻게 연구로 와
So when we examine this, we really see how this is really the case that so much of our kind of experience of outer objects and outer appearances is really based on the projections of our own mind. So for instance, if you take any given place or sort of any particular environment, and you place 100 different people in that same environment, you'll have 100 different perceptions about the nature, the qualities of that environment. So not everyone is going to feel the same way about it. You know, some people will see it as a really, you know, delightful place. They'll really enjoy it. They may, you know, think this is just a really wonderful place, you know. And then there are another group of people who will, you know, think it's really a terrible place, you know, that it's not pleasant, it's not desirable. And so you have that kind of, you know, such a variety of opinions based on, you know, all the different perceptions and projections of individuals. And so this is something that, for instance, business, you know, or consumerism really sort of takes advantage of, you know, all of the different sort of desires and opinions of people, you know, can lead to, you know, the creation of all sorts of different products that suits all of these different people's needs, you know. So for instance, like think about something like pants, you know, there's so many different types of pants, you know, there are different styles and different colors. And, you know, some pants, you know, some people think, oh, these are really nice pants. These are great pants. I really like them. And some people might think they're really ugly. They don't like them at all, you know, or they're uncomfortable or they're not what they like, you know. And so in this way, you know, the mind has such a diverse sort of reaction, or such a diversity of perception when it comes to the desirable or the undesirable qualities of outer objects. These are really entirely created by the mind. And so these qualities don't exist in the objects themselves, but it really is a projection or a perception that is based on how the mind is apprehending the objects that it comes into contact with. So it's important to recognize that this is actually happening, because the default is to just attribute our reaction to the objects to the objects themselves. But actually, it really is the perception of one's own mind. So when one is aware of that, then there is the power and the ability to actually consciously change your perception in a way that actually ends up being of benefit to your own heart and mind, and quite possibly to others. So for instance, in the practice of secret mantra in Vajrayana, there is the practice of pure view, of developing pure view, where one practices intentionally holding the perception of you know, purity for all that is experienced. So you know, one practices seeing the outer environment, you know, as the pure display of, you know, the pure Buddha fields. One practices seeing the sentient beings or others as pure manifestations of deities, and so on and so forth. So there is actually the ability to purify one's perception to the extent that everything that appears, anything that appears, whatever is possible, becomes, you know, the pure, the sort of immaculate or pure display of the great expanse. And so this requires, of course, having the ability to take to understand that that the perception really is that one's perception comes from the mind itself, that it isn't really about the outer objects. for those who don't have much experience with practice, then actually it tends to be, there are some who tend to have a kind of maybe sunny disposition, and they tend to kind of see things in a positive light. But for the vast majority, the tendency can often be to always see the negative, to always find faults, to always think, oh, this isn't any good. I don't like this. This isn't okay. There's some problem here, without, and there's no investigation of that. There's just kind of the assumption that that's how it is, and the problem is external. And so this environment or this place isn't good. This person isn't any good. This leader isn't any good, and so on and so forth. These things aren't up to par, but so there's the tendency to always kind of see the negative side, and yet there can be, over time, one's perception can really shift. So one can have the tendency to really sort of automatically see things in a negative light, to always find the faults, to always find the problems. And then gradually, this can really change, so that actually one's tendency is actually more to see things in a positive light.
당연히 됐디 시어와 대 휴지 뭐
Oh,
휴요.
that's all. Yeah.
Really, that's the interesting story. Wa, pena, pena ta, ma short I di kasi kore Asian people in the da ma chiji. Oh, samalanga American Robins, America da pechuore, senapeta, koranji. Luton, sort on ya ke pen tango United, American Rogra. Yine yang something at the America ding at the Zola. Near Tingo, Mangaman delivery, President Kotobina, the Pono wins. Gaya, Canada, and the Poyos, Gaya, Euro, Poyorwa. Tindoji, Yore, Kujipa, concept and Damdarawa. Tindit is.
So it's interesting because, for instance, in Dhruvan's own experience, he says, among Asians, there tends to, especially those who...
Also not only, maybe everywhere, all whole.
Not, those especially who are living under, living in communist countries, or countries that are not democracies, then there's a real sort of view that America is a really, kind of perfect place, and they have a real desire to go to America. It's to the extent where they'll even risk their own life, for, or spend, do their all their own life and all of their wealth and so forth to get to America. And then, on the other hand, here in America, and also maybe European countries, then there's sort of a different concept of all of the problems, of the country, and kind of an attitude of or maybe if a particular leader actually comes into power, that then they say, I'm going to leave the country, I'm going to move to Canada or something.
Tin ta ti indi ko karsina ngeta lavya karsina ko nama to tsama ka yo wala tene tini ko ji karsidu mulkin doba tini ka yungdo wa.
And so, I mean, really, actually, it really does come down to the perceptions, the different perceptions and the different kind of mind states of beings. That as inwardly the mind projects in such a way that is unique to that particular person, then to that person, outer appearances appear very differently than they might to somebody else who has a different set of projections.
괜히 다 나랑게 냠용으로 지위나 땅가도 내만 디궁티 세야다 가도 근육으로 봐. 디궁티를 근육이다 빼 고요래다 디궁티 빼 다치 모임 봐. 딘디 쉬우지다 쌈고요래. 딘디드네 tenga zonga diguntin do yorwa diguntin do yore ten diguntin do ne tenga to langala be kale yore langala da tidu chi tanga to tak do ti chimbo ji na do go gure tindi ti na le be de meni khu sumju tindi be de go yore tega na ji jala yore tega na ji tanda ta chap do ta khanda de ji the plastic no thought of the cabgrua be open some major on the water be yo mari or tiniti the kandaji be ta carse be nani be da kali khane tindi be yo ni tindi kali kha yo wa ine tindi ngato mini ya ndo ngi tindi di un tinto se lamgaji ko tindi ji tindi changma tindi ya ji ngato di tab yo la da no ta di gung di thong do la yo wa tindi gung di thong yo wa tindi ko ji 원에 랑기 대바트다 지 포지티브 로지로 근데 이제 지 초바로 다 디군티 통소 로지 섬티네 과지로도 와 가서는 그 카르사이트 메바차 근데 지 참아 메바로지 배 수부 초바데 배 대바쇼 침보로 이용도 와 뒤에 고지 나와 디게 지 나와 시너리 샘게 이렇게 그 느파티게 루 코로나야 군주바티네 대한 도구였어요.
So Druban says, he remembers an experience that he had when he traveled to the monastery Drikungtil, which many of you are familiar with. It's the kind of main monastery or the main seat of our lineage in Tibet. And it's a really precious holy place. It's considered to be a very precious holy place. And to get there, is not easy, especially back then. The roads were really rough roads, and it took a really, really long time. And there were so many people piled into one truck, like 20 to 30 people piled into a small truck with something like just a plastic tarp cover. And actually, especially in Druban's case, he gets car sick very easily. So he was like really car sick, the whole time. And it was just really uncomfortable. So many people, piled in, and bumpy road, and just a really, really kind of unpleasant. But as they approached Drikungtil, and they could see, the top of the monastery sort of, just in the distance, that just they first, could see it appearing. And then there was this incredible feeling that arose, because they all had, so much faith. And sort of a feeling of really positive, mind state that arose. And it was really incredible because in that moment, like the car sickness just completely disappeared. And he just completely forgot about the discomfort. And so, because the power of the mind, seeing something in a positive light, completely changed the experience. And this really shows, how powerful the mind is, that even based on such a strong kind of positive perception arising, that this could even change his physical experience, that it even like it was the case that he felt really blissful, he no longer felt car sick, or no longer felt uncomfortable.
근데 similarly 다 가서 야갈이 용도 야갈이 용도 때네 다 야갈이 용지 때네 다 야가 레버리 야갈리도 다 야가 용고야디 가슴 다 저들이 지 야갈라 용고야 그 자원로디 지 야기 야갈라 베지 사야당 통야당 딘리베 데오당 대자요 말이 대가나 얘기 맞죠 용고야 지다 야갈라 로종약 보여 같은 데인다고 차리 칸요 말이 차리는 쪼에 거지 다 맞춘디나 같이는 미친디나 그러다 야와를 뭐지 등마진 예고도 선부다 데려다디 야와를 뭐지 에 제약치 들라더니 지그다 소쇼나쇼 가리는 레라 우리가 말와 보는 게 좋아라 어다 뒤인데네 다 단다고 샘 시츄에이션도 그래더니 나도 다 드니 야갈래버리 야갈래버리 되니 다 나도 카토 보는 용지 드니 진데네 야갈나나 다동문이 들 군가랑다 말에 다 배제 동간도 오지 인사래 동가 뭐 이렇게랑다 말에 다 군가도 오지래 딜레버리 이는 다 뒤지 보는 용선데 딜레버 차와 세네 내 치네 배 근데 방법 같다 배네 배유는 바스나로 용고 그래 근데 야 딜레 다 휴직 나서 배 나와 당트니 지 칼라토스가 유노 코나베 사야 메죠 너다 강다처럼 너 휴지 지지 배다 강다지 고칸 너 뒤지는 탐보로 주니가 말와 딘디 지지 때네 딜라니마 마모도 되고 서서 가선다 되게 부흉기지 다들도 지지 바스방고 여러와 이나다 디바스 마모도 요사마레 디디다 지금 동에 마모요 되니
간데네
이나 바스 마모 동에 미요 말와 이나 가서 딜리니마 마모 되고 더 여러와
오케이
이네야 다 딘디 지지 다 강다야 되지 롱 스토리 여러와 이나 때네 다 강다들이 야좀 송지 때네 탐망어야 다 다른 사 통고도 또 랍송아 걔는 가서 버스 나기다 되니 가른다 오지 통도 다 다른 사람이 줄이 통도 되니 굳이 나 찍파 찍창으로 와지 선배들은 좋아하면 다 야와는 뭐지 이거 효요래 다 야와는 뭐지 제세자다면 예토 그래 나 삼번도 지리 근데 굳이 수고 나서서 상황 다 알아오도 와 나서 강연매지 서로 대화로 텐디 용도 스테이니까 대체 그 지유 샘게 게다 지고도 유들이 이제 제통 다름사 자침보리 베란디군티 자침보다리 이네요 조카스나 자침보 임바데 랑크 소도와 랑게 소비 dim센텔에 되네 되지 펜토야 랑라 요레스 디니 제가 나기 야지 그 네게티브 산다고 의미나 되네 enge tangi kontiwa 나기리 오지가 본부 야고면도 프레지던트 야고면도 로지 삼기 되네 지 텐디 계산노 당비나 되고 근데 가두이나 그 두 번도 이제 통되게 와. 지당 상모도 보라고. 다 지당 파지든지 지고 말에 지 하나야 저거 조모이나 텐데 여러와. 나 저거 조모 선노 당비 당법에 지 파서 제와요. 가고 요베 깔라. 가리 때나 지 야보임바, 상보임바, 남반지보요와 지 사탕, 조탕, 통탕 참아 야보임바라고 지. 그 수수고요. 이내 양 니마지 투바쇼 그 드니지 차송도 다 양고 가르스나 가리 이나 누구노 통으로 봐 남바양 야고 매바 사탕 도탕 치탕 레탕 가리 이나지 거지 그 누구노 이제 출고 이나 거마도 찍까지 창으로 봐 아니 저거 임비가라 메테가라데 저거 마인비가라 메테가라로 봐 딘디인들이 다 좋은 것들이 샘그 소고요 와 삼사 드니 용구도 와 지 저 샘크 소고래 저랑 저거도 통도 빼 가워로 용구도 와 가장지 쉬인 바더니 맞아 볼라 딱 그때 릴레이트인데 우리 가장 그나 저거로 토비나 바로 사진으로 올라 그러와 이나 다들 강이 찍다 년반으로 지러와 이나 저거도 빼 가그래다 이는 양고 지금 마가 완전히 드니지 라비나 때문에 딱건 초파쇼리 안 하고 능약 안 레벨이라고 뒤에다 또 갈수나 거지 나와 참아디 샘기 때문에 되니 김도구에서 레스티 지유를 많이 봐
So it was really actually a very similar thing when when Drupalna and others were traveling to India from Tibet. So, you know, of course, in India, the climate, the food, the culture, everything is completely different. And so it was really like, especially having never left Tibet for their whole lives, then, coming to India was a real kind of culture shock, and also really, many of them felt, actually were really kind of sick even, because, and yet when traveling to India, there wasn't the much thought beyond meeting His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So it wasn't like they had all these plans, like I'm going to go to India and then I'm going to study and I'm going to do this and that. It really was just the sole thought: if I have the opportunity in this life to meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama, even just once, that then my life will have been meaningful. Even so that aspiration was so powerful and sort of foremost in their minds, that they thought, even at the cost of my own life, it's worth attempting, this journey. Even if it is that the outcome is death, which in fact has been the case for many of the Tibetans who have escaped to India from Tibet, crossing the Himalayas by foot, given all of the dangers, of escaping. But in any case, once they had, passed they had arrived in Nepal, and then they traveled to India, and they arrived in Delhi in India. And at this point, they were very tired, and also not feel, the food was such an adjustment. There wasn't much food available. They couldn't really, it was difficult to eat the food because it was so different, and it was also really hot, even though India at that time, wasn't even in the summer. It was like more in the fall, or nearly winter, and yet it was still so hot in comparison. And so they weren't feeling well. And then there was another, really long sort of bus, truck, ride in a truck with a bunch of people, on bumpy roads, in the heat. And again, Drubanda felt really car sick. And so anyway, it was, it's like a longer story, the whole journey. But in any case, when they started to approach Dharamsala, and they could see, the mountains, the mountain peaks, so, in the distance, again, there was this completely, this complete transformation of experience based on, the positive perception that had arisen in the mind, because with that feeling of approaching Dharamsala and seeing the mountains in the distance, there was this thought, like, I actually will meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama in this life. 100% I'm going to have the opportunity to meet him. And so then the whole body was just pervaded by this really blissful feeling, and all of the discomfort, the car sickness, the and kind of difficulty, all of the other difficulties, the heat and so forth, it just completely was no longer an issue. Just like it happened for him when he was approaching Drikung Til. So of course, Dharamsala and Drikung Til are, really, places that have a lot of blessing. So they are, really powerful places, but mainly the difference has to do with the perception of the mind. So when the mind is apprehending outer objects in a positive and pure light, then the experience is one that is so much more positive inwardly. It can even, as he said before, it can even change a physical the physical reality of the body, or the feeling of the body. And so on the other hand, when there's always the negative side, then that's kind of becomes our ongoing experience, is one that is sort of, pervaded by these kind of negative emotions and judgments. So, if we're always sort of focused on, the leaders or the president, the president isn't any good, sort of in thinking in that way, then all the time we're going to hold this, be really sort of stuck in that perception. And not just with like leaders and presidents, but also with friends, and companions. If we if we view our friends and companions in a positive light, then there is a really, there, like, the experience is one that is really positive, or there's kind of like harmony there. So, we can all know the difference. Like, if we have a close friend or a companion that we spend time with, and that we generally think like really highly of, or that we really care about or love. But then if we get in a fight, or if we somehow decide, find ourselves at odds with that friend, or there's a dispute there, then suddenly this friend that you usually had seen in such a positive light, you see in such a negative light. And everything about them before, maybe everything about them was really pleasant. Like, you found that, their face really pleasant to look at, even like everything they do, the way they walk, the way they move, the way they, talk, the way they eat their food. All of this is like seen as like really kind of, you find it kind of adorable or nice. But then when you're fighting with this person, then everything about them turns negative. You sort of see them as, unattractive and not nice to look at, and everything that they do gets on your nerves, even the way that they walk. And so this is all, exclusively due to the perception that we hold. On the other hand, in some of the weeks prior, Drupal Rinpoche was saying, talking about how there's this custom in Tibet where when you're really, really close with someone, if you're really good friends, then there's kind of this sort of custom of sort of teasing one another by calling each other names, by like insulting one another, or saying kind of, mean things. But it's not because you're friends. Actually, like, this is all, it's all in sort of like good fun and good humor. So someone can say really mean things to you, your friend, and of course it becomes funny, or it's not something that
Or happy,
it makes you happy, sort of. But if somebody were to say those same things to another person who was more like an enemy, then they would become furious. This would be the very same words would cause a really angry reaction. And so the difference, of course, is with regard to the perception of the mind.
我的听ดู听呢，睇到，啊听ดู他其他南湾的让xem听ดู听呢，他南湾的xem嘞，种嘞，他的上面签个的xem音吧，这个呢一个他其他谈空头那一类，个南湾的他们个就就当下有的，年巴了也就就当下的。ko rang semindu ko jucho ta yu imbare ta tindu te mai ba yu ina yu sa khaborwa penanga chu ji lungba ji nyingji o mewe na lungba ji nyingji o sa khabore inda karina ji ngobo karina chi yu jel tengo na tene khabore nga so ta nyamlan ji ne sono tangwi na rang semri sha zambati ko ji dewa chunyen de rang semri sha dungye chunyen de rang semri sha tinde imbe ki jimsen tene ada 직대와 녹이면도 모두 동인 녹이면도 될 때에는 고직 동이 이렇게 단기 공식이나 유 네게티브 스타트라더니 해직 빵야 그가나 이게 제가서 대화고도 대화도야들라 가지나 랑 셈리 근데 인디 지 유들라 양한테 지 positive side 와 간디나 제타 제타 유즈함노 제 땅비나 지윤도 섬도나 강사 메리 제타로 제너럴 가리었으나 뭐 같이 누구 요나 텔레코란티나 상부 퀄리티 되네 요리 와 뭐 간디 상보이다 코페 야포 휴지리라비나 야 콜레 네게티브 사이드 요래 되네 페네티송도와 지 라만도 지 체니 창대와 되네도 이비나 되네 쫑다디나 좀 빼고 요래 좀 라게 송데 좀빼 망보 요래스 송부로 되나 얘기다 지 강사 간디 메고 간디 야보레 삼비나 지금 좀 논주기 좀 그쳐라 섬노 따미나 좀 통야 요래 어디도 다 딘디게 지 가르치는 가서 가르쳐모 땅고 요래라나 좀 통백qabla 랑 들어와 간디스도 와 되네지 파르조라 포지티브로 지 개베기초 상보기초 통백qabla 랑 들어와 간디스도 따따고 와 딘디인지 치 파르조 누버레 삼바 대가랑 가리용고리 요르세나 랑알라티 지오메바디 용고다 된가서 고고 말와 디네 고 유이텔라 거지 누구 이나다 가서 누버레 삼나 고 노르 너야 요 말에 nga yuite pe ko yakbo shujire samna yabo ron ro yo mare yine yakbo da dubo songyenti ran ke we nga so ragrwa nga so we get o tinde indu tene nga so yi tmo karina jigda 제타 유수 저치야라고 다 지다 상의 프로블럼 가시 나도 랍고 그 프로블럼 메와 소야 타기 지기 지야 요르데 이래요 그 same thing can do hitela tene negative side that somebody is
so when we hold the understanding that ultimately appearances are our own mind, or how things appear really depend on our own mind, then we can consciously change our perception. We can choose to see things in a favorable light, or in a way that actually ends up benefiting our own mind. And this doesn't, of course, change the outer objects themselves. You know, it's much easier to change your perception than it is to try to change the outer objects. If we want to, you know, we can't actually control outer objects so much. So therefore, you know, often it's futile to try to get the outer objects to change. But what we do have control over is how we choose to receive those objects, how we choose to perceive and view them. So when we think, oh, it really is, you know, it's really my own mind, you know, how I view this really depends on how I choose to see it. And so it actually is the mind who actually experiences the result of perception. So when we view things in a favorable light, or sort of in a more kind of generous and positive light, then actually the feeling that comes to the mind, or the way that we feel, is you know, we should investigate, you know, how is it that we feel when we choose to see things in a positive way? And generally it's the case that, you know, one's own experience is actually happier, you know, that one feels more content when one is seeing the world, you know, through a positive lens, when one is, you know, holding kind of a pure view of people and things. And yet the one who experiences happiness is the mind, and the one who experiences suffering is also the mind. And so when we see things in a negative light, then usually then that kind of, creates an unpleasant feeling. We don't like the things that we perceive as negative. And so then there's this kind of, dissatisfaction or kind of suffering that arises in the mind based on, viewing things in this sort of negative way. So if we want to feel content and happy, then it really is to our best advantage to choose to hold a more positive outlook, to choose to see things from the positive side, to actually identify the good qualities instead of focusing or dwelling on the bad. And so this doesn't change the outer objects at all. No matter if we choose, no matter how much we focus on the negative, our perception of the negative doesn't make the thing any more negative. Likewise, our perception of the positive doesn't necessarily make, it doesn't make the outer thing, any better, any more positive. But what it does do is that it ends up changing one's own experience through that sort of positive perception of viewing, choosing to see the positive or the qualities. Everything has both positive and negative characteristics. Every single person has good qualities and bad qualities, or good qualities and faults. And so it really kind of can come down to what we choose to focus on. If we're only seeing, problems and faults in others, then that's all we're going to see. We're not, and in fact, the focus on those faults and problems is going to completely prevent us from being able to see their positive qualities. But everybody, even those who have quite a lot of faults, they also have some qualities, and likewise, those who have a lot of qualities also have faults. So we should see, we can kind of play around with it and see how our experience changes, especially when it comes to interacting with others and choosing to see others in a positive light. So if we interact with others and we choose to focus on their qualities, we choose to see them in a positive light, how does that affect our own experience? Does that actually improve the quality of our own experience inwardly? Do we actually feel happier when we do this? On the other hand, when we're really kind of in like a space of seeing others in a really negative light and focusing on their faults and complaining, how does that outlook affect our own mind? So we should spend some time kind of investigating, or examining this. And those, if we choose to see the negative, then we can always find it. So it is said, even those really spiritually exalted beings, even the greatest of lamas or spiritual teachers who, have really like an abundance of extraordinary qualities, even for that, for those individuals, if you choose to find faults, surely they are there. Surely you will find them if the focus is on the negative. And likewise, even somebody who really seemingly at first we take to be somebody who really doesn't have any redeeming qualities, who's really just, has a bunch of faults, who's a really negative person. If we look, then we'll see that there are also qualities there. So it really, again, it really comes down to our perception, the perception of our own mind. So it is a beneficial practice to diminish, the kind of negative perceptions, the tendency toward a negative, having sort of a judgmental mind and seeing things in a negative light, and to really make an effort to see the positive. And we'll find that actually the greatest benefit of doing so really comes to us.
Same Jipota is a Marina Korani Lamaji Yores, Gemoji Yores. Then la make a chuchi ke payon on Tinechi, that quality so to love you Sarwa, Tinila Yang, Tine, Lama Koran Kitini, negative side Larwa, Migewi Kicholatin, Mambo, that love you Sarwa. Tinimaji Gemoti Labares. What I Lamarambuchi, Chara gave it or Mambo love good was that 10 days I'm not Tamina or Lamachino Sanji I am but a touch. In a among Aralaya, better Sanji Rosaries.
Wait, Chirang gave it or Mambo love you, didn't
Giving all of some of Tambinas, give a touch on the reaching the Gava, you're in the reaching the Gava, you're in the reaching the Gava, you're the Labgrava. In the Taco, Tendi, of course, Lamachorala, Sanjia is 100%. In a young Nasanji grace, the reaching the Gava, you're in the reaching the Gava, you're in the reaching the Gava, Japan Kuno, in a tattoo and that it is perception, shall go in Hakum, in a young one it action, you said it. Tenditine, Gemo Calabarsena. Tine Choraya Sanjia da Indi Timati Balangaya Sanji Grace Sanji.
Kuntanga Tessa Yabokomason.
Tine
go Nela, young and Chikila.
Tine Lamaji Yores, Gemoji Yores. Tine la make that sometimes you do what is some Megaware, still love Gujirwa. Oh, Chundo now. Tine young sometimes la make colors or the Megaware and the Richinatini, Labgrava.
Some say that Chirang Mige Ting Manila, some like Geware, some like Megaware. Okay.
Tell of the Gemoti Calabio Lana. Touch around Megawa Laviati, some not in the Tamina. Maritambo Gewarawa. Give some not in the Tipion, gave Pion or some of Tamina. Tine Lamachona Sanji Grilate. Tita Mazi Naya Sanji Grace. Yina Yachora Megaware Labgravati, Yangata Neravan Royal race. Timothy Lamachona Neravan Grace. Tacos of the Gunon.
So there's a story of like a lama who was teaching an old woman. And sometimes, so he was teaching the Dharma, and sometimes he would be saying, oh, this is virtue and that is virtue, and when one does this virtue, there's this positive outcome and so forth. So he would talk a lot about pointing out what is virtue, and then sometimes he would be pointing out what is non-virtue. This is non-virtue and that is non-virtue, and this is and so on and so forth. And so then one day the woman said to him, oh, Lama, so you are saying, this is virtue and that is virtue, and there's so many of these things that are virtue. So based on that, Lama, you of course will become a Buddha, but I also will become a Buddha, based on all of that virtue.
So that the moral quality you're what?
Because of course she also had, because all of these virtues or qualities. And then she said, but then Lama, you also say this is non-virtue and that is non-virtue and all of the non-virtue. And based on that, I will definitely go to hell. And Lama, you also will definitely go to hell.
Positive, negative,
so the point being that there's always positive and negative. There's always a sort of both.
Positive
So we can't ever only find the positive, like a totally isolated positive.
대가 나기 negative.
And the same with the negative.
대가 나기 대송 그러와. 가서는 기타 가서 썸노도 있고 perception 마다위나 아주 상제라고 지 통비나 상제리 삼고 말고 그 정도도 삼 그러와. 계시 상제라고 따는 상제의 종요 말아 폴디오 말아. 이내야 그 가서는 아주 세마다 웬거라. 그 다다 야고 시라면도 삼 그러와.
But really, when it comes down to it, perception really has to do with the purity of one's own mind. So if, like somebody who is a fully enlightened Buddha really doesn't have any faults. So they've completely, they've awakened, they've transcended all the faults of samsara. And yet, if our own perception is not pure, then we can look at somebody who is as pure as even the Buddha himself and still find faults.
어다티 대가 나기 기타 단다디 계체 효지 되요다는 지츠밀레 기타 지랑소 지츠밀레 남다도 뭐 로여와 되는 지츠밀레 게 남다도 지다 지츠밀라디 고 대사제라 대기요 말이 되네 지 되네 고다 지 카르당 되네 지 작공 작르당 되네 다 가사 가는 로네 되네 꼼자기요와 대가 나기 코로나 지다 뭐니 전에 고함랑 김유마토 요 말이 되네 지 삼삼이야 사제질 고함뭐 제도 되네 오다 될 참바지 비샤도 스네 저 뭐뭐 지할래 야 칼라 뭐뭐티 되니지비야 좋은도로 사제 힘마 인다데고 티 기타다 통당에 탄다 디미 칼라고 있으나 저치가 라야디 되네 지쯤을라더니 사제 살바지 레바테가라 고랑 고르지 숨거와 고르지 숨거래 오 답에 사제는 배교도 스네 다 텐리베 카르닝기우도 소닝기우도 되네 신나닝기우도 야단이 다르다 제전도 정말 닝기우도 손에다 닝기우베 텐리베기 되네 대가나의 결론반달라더니 지 클라이나데 로이나데 되네 힘다이나데 또 정말 야고도 제송으로 되는데다디 뭐네제 테리도와 가서네 초직디도 지금이나 코나 답백 나왔더니 통구 요지리 얘네 초 현실 삼는데 코나 양거도 와 다더니 이 약보도 얘는 가서디 초년의 지지도 데 공리적으로 그래와 공바마이 롱도 조나 공바이 소원나 이지지 아주 공식적으로 단지 유튜브 장기 처되어 요 말은 아주 perception으로 perception데 요로고 그러와 뒤에 아주 장에 순데 지금 마다위 나와데 그때 전바히도 그 답에 나와 통야나 대가 나기 그 답에 나와디 랑 perception 답에 깔라 치 유게 뭐 통고래 배나 자잖아 셈 넘버 다 되어지 요위나 상제라고 지 통민다 상제리 삼거와 다 고모네 참 좀도 삼바 통고래 라 상제 많이 위나 되네 지 상제라고 지 통민다 도는 그 그런 게 좀으로 지 고람만다고 지 통거와 다 뒤인데네 쭉 가시나 rank senti tamada oda terali diores
So also, as Dribanla mentions often, actually, the great yogi Jetsun Milarepa, who spent his life just moving, sort of from mountain solitary places for meditation, to other solitary places for meditation throughout, the different regions of Tibet. So he would, maybe travel to one spot and he would stay there meditating for some time. And then maybe he would make connections. Some of, the people in the area would discover that a great yogi was meditating there, and they would come and they would make offerings to him, or they would give him food, and then Milarepa would give them some teachings. And so there was maybe some exchange that would happen in this one place. And then before long, then he would move on to another spot, another location, and spend some time meditating there. And so each time he would move to a new location, So we have, the songs, the 100,000 songs of Milarepa, and one will see that often the songs will begin with sort of a praise of the qualities of the place. So he'll say something like, "Oh, here I am in this really lovely and wonderful place, and the mountain is good, and the forests is good, and the birds are good, and the wild animals are good and wonderful." And all the spirits, the nagas and the land spirits and so forth that inhabit or dwell in these places are benevolent and wonderful. And so there's sort of this praise of the qualities of the place that will come at the beginning of some of these songs. And that sort of is an indication of sort of the benefit of having a pure perception or seeing, sort of the beauty and the qualities of the place that one inhabits. When the case of Milarepa, of course, Milarepa probably had, completely pure view. So he really viewed his environment as a pure realm. And yet, on the other hand, it could also be kind of something that demonstrates the need to practice viewing things in this way. So almost like a practice in and of itself, because everything, when it comes to the practice of Dharma, it's about developing tendencies through habituation. So of course, as you know, the famous saying, it is not so much meditation, but more a process of habituation, which, as many of you know, is a play on words in Tibetan, as it is Gompa Mayin, Kompa Yin. And so really, when we practice, seeing things in a certain way, well, then eventually that practice becomes a tendency, it becomes a default perception. So even though we may have started out with a tendency of being kind of grumpy and negative and always sort of complaining or seeing the negative side, when we actively work to change our view and to have a more perception with regard to, the outer environment and things, and especially other people, eventually it really becomes that our outlook really becomes more pure. It becomes naturally sort of a default positive outlook. But this can be developed through training or through habituation. And so if we have, if one has a really pure mind or a pure outlook, then one can really, see, for instance, if one can see anyone as like a pure emanation of a Buddha, one can really think, wow, and fully just see this person as, being, having no faults and just being full of completely full of qualities. On the other hand, if one has a really negative outlook, then one can even meet the Buddha face to face and not really see the qualities of the Buddha. One can still only see faults or, faults there, or only see the negative.
어떻게 나기다 나랑 그 냠용도 위나 어쩌다 나 네코만 뭐 요르와 holy place 텐두티네 다 사창가시 딱 뭐네 holy place리 이나가랑 하코우요 말와 하코우요 말에 근데 제리 하코우로와 나게 딱고 당보네 famous 차디 유럽에 감보바 게 곰바 탈라 감보 세야로 오다 제가 나기다 빼나 탈라 감보도 오선 땅비나 되네 감보바 게 댄사 제가 나기다 나나 조직 지금 포원 작동 시야게 댄lensa tindi당 되네 제가 나기다 난 지금 게 되네 데려와 대좀 스타 대좀 속한 그리 양종 세야다 양자 게 댄lensa로 속한 그리 양종으로 그리 양종
Mhm.
Tene da tiga nang yi ke da ya je tang lo ne la bu lo ne la da southern holy place. Je tang da pu la ro sam tang bi na je tang ne te la da kam cho la ne yo ri na ma je ne cha tang te la tene ya da ka sa ga ri tang te zang ka cho le yo ro ba ti ta tang bo ti la de sa tiga nang yi da ngo ne za qin bu ne lo sam tang bi na tene da ne za je jo te la tene 대열에 강화를 못치 되네 랍치 되네 자리에서야 대열에 되네 제가 나 이게 다시 힌트 시작해서 무슨 어떤데 요리 나다 강다양 단다리 구롱으로 와 뒤에지 내 자신고 요리 삼바지 다 틀려고 지 섬도 되네 지 내 자신보다 가발래비나 되네 수로한테도 만다와노 스페셜 통도와 thiên 대양한테 원에 내 대양 스페셜 요래도 이내야 거지랑 당번에 직 대바당 당나당 고텔 직 아다 나와 야보지 요 좀 생각을 때네 네 거지 가두이나 직 믹스로 어떻게 연구도 우스 네트 레벨까
Tene Shimbayang Mayambaro? Shimbayang Mayambaro?
다 힘만 내 자체 보이나 당보시다 게라 요 말와 게라 생각을 하마고 있나 다 당보 거지 그 자체 모델 삼로시다 요 말와 대메디 되네지 네려노 제로 네 특별 자체 모델 샤로 마토비 비가를 직출하고 다가 스페셜 휴지 랩 선삼반하고 고출과 연구면도 좀 생각해서 당보하고 그거 말와 예를 드는 사고 다네 때문에 자체 뭐 슈레 다 지지 메모리 랍 그러와 다 드린다고 돼 있습니다.
So Drupalnath says, in his experience of a pilgrimage in Tibet, when he was traveling to different holy places, there were there are many really, really powerful holy sites, and some of them, he knew beforehand that they were holy places, and some of them actually he didn't know, so some of them were really famous, and he knew, and so there was this great regard for the place before he went there. And then there were some places that he went to or he spent time in that actually he didn't know they were holy places until afterwards, and then maybe somebody told him that oh wow, I was wow, that was a really holy place. But so for instance, some of the really famous holy sites, like the holy places that are connected with Gampopa, like Taglagomba, or also like many of the holy Drikunkagyu sites, like the place where the Poa Jaksukma Terma was revealed or extracted, or like Terdrum, or Tsokang Kiri Yangzom, which was the place where the Yangsa termas or treasures were extracted. And then there were also like a lot of really holy places in the southern districts, the southern regions, but mostly, and some in Kham, but mostly the central areas of Tibet, or like around central Tibet and in Sang. These are where there are just like so many countless holy sites, and so when he would know, where he was going, when visiting a really famous or really precious holy site that he knew of, like Mount Kailash, Lapji, Tsari, then together with going there, there's this motivation or this understanding, there's already this pure view in the mind. And so he would, having the perception that these are really pure holy places, he would get there and like inevitably amazing things would happen. It would be a really special experience. He could really feel the power of the place. But so much of this, and definitely there are, the energetic qualities that come from the places themselves, but so much of it also really is dependent upon sort of the pure view and the perception of the mind. And so on the other hand, when he would visit these places unknowingly, like there wasn't really any special feeling necessarily. He had no recognition, you know, of the whole, you know, the powers of the place, because he didn't know until afterwards. And so it wasn't as you know, sort of extraordinary of it of an experience, you know, when this understanding or pure view wasn't there.
어다 디네 정도 참들 샤 되네 기타다 디슈라 다 산이랑 샘들랑 이모로 티고테 라비스 테라와 제가 나왔는다랑 심리도는 두비 타타 제스야 돼.
Oh, the chikpa verse chikpa.
네.
Okay. So any case, we've now actually run out of time. So we've only gotten through the first line of this verse, which is appearances are one's own mind, or the way things appear are one's own mind. So then next Sunday, then we'll discuss the second part of this first part of the verse, which is from the beginning, that very mind has been free from elaborated extremes, or from the beginning, mind's nature is free from the extremes of elaboration. So that's what we'll discuss then, or we'll pick up with that next Sunday. And the charge Oh, okay. So we'll do a short dedication, and then actually we're going to have, so we're ending a little bit early today because Mark Steiner, who is the president of our organization, Drongor Jiangchu Bling, is going to give us a brief presentation on the accomplishments that have transpired with the new Shrine Hall construction. And he'll also let us know where we're heading in this exciting chapter in our center's evolution. So we'll do the dedication prayer, the brief dedication prayer on page 24 of the prayer book. By the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate root of virtue, may I and all beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Dragungpa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, Master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for participating in these wonderful teachings and practice. We're very fortunate to have the opportunity to practice, study and practice with Drupal Rinpoche, and we also owe a debt of gratitude to Virginia for her wonderful translation. I assumed the role of president in March of this year and have been working with the board of directors, officers, and Drupal to manifest the wonderful vision we have of a vibrant meditation center that will be a sanctuary of peace and rejuvenation to numerous people. I also have had the good fortune to help with various aspects of the outdoor infrastructure on the new Shrine Hall. I'd like to have a few minutes of your time to let you know about the changes and progress on the new Shrine Hall and where the project is headed. We're excited about the progress we're making, and we have a few photos we'd like to share with you. In 2012, Drongner acquired a 1.8 acre parcel of land in Wesley Chapel with the intention of developing a flourishing center for the study and practice of Tibetan Buddhism. Drupal Rinpoche and Sangha members remodeled one of the existing houses on the property, which has served as the current shrine room and guest rooms for visitors. In 2015, the building that will house the new Shrine Hall was constructed. With construction With consecrations from both His Holiness Chetsang Rinpoche and His Eminence Garchen Rinpoche, Drongner has quickly developed into a thriving center that each of us has grown to love and enjoy. Since then, the land and existing structures have been transformed through Drupal Rinpoche's tireless effort and the hard work of committed Sangha members. The center is located in a neighborhood where all of the houses are sitting on 1 to 3 acres. Currently, 6 houses, in addition to the center, have been purchased in the immediate neighborhood by people connected to the center. At this time, 4 of the houses, including the center, are located in the same block as the center. And Damien is using his pointer to kind of show where it is. And then our vision is to have at a minimum all 7 properties on the block where the center is located owned by Sangha members. We also have, in addition to the 4 properties on that block, there are 3 other properties owned by Sangha members adjacent to the center. Lincoln Crone is a realtor who keeps his finger on the pulse if any properties open up for sale, and is a contact person for anyone interested in purchasing property in the area. There are numerous ponds and lush vegetation which supports abundant wildlife in the neighborhood. As some of you know, in 2018, Drongner began construction on various exterior improvements of the property in preparation for opening the new Shrine Hall. The project falls under the Pasco County commercial zoning permit process, and we've been required to build in significant infrastructure. These infrastructure improvements have included the following projects that we've completed. 6 storm drains were installed that direct water into a new retention pond. Water runoff due to heavy rain, which falls during the summer months, can create problems with localized flooding. Drainage is important so that you don't create problems on your own property or on your neighbor's property. That's the finished retention pond that's holding water. And then additionally, we dug a new commercial water well and installed a new pumping system and upgraded the septic system to commercial standards on the property. We landscaped the parking area and perimeter of the property, which included planting 14 30-gallon trees, 190 shrubs, and we laid a significant amount of sod. An irrigation system was installed to water the landscape. Sidewalks were installed for easy access from parking lot to the temple. And we completed the parking lot with 30 designated parking spaces and asphalted the driveway and a portion of the street next to the center. The property has beautiful outdoor spaces where people can gather or relax. As mentioned earlier, the majority of this work was done by Sangha members, and no one has worked harder and longer hours than Drupal Rinpoche. As part of Drupal Rinpoche's unfolding vision for the future of Drongner, we're now entering the last stage of construction on our center's expansion and renovation plan. This will include finishing both the exterior and interior of the new Shrine Hall building. The interior will include installing a new air conditioning system space and seating for 90 people, traditional decorations, a tray ceiling with a mandala mural, a wood altar, and state-of-the-art sound system. The interior walls will be sided with beautiful cedar wood. We're still awaiting approval of the final permit in order to work on the interior of the Shrine Hall, but we're hopeful the permit will be approved in the near future. As you know, the pandemic has disrupted activities at Drang Nur, and we will not be holding in-person events for the foreseeable future. Though we look forward to a grand reopening with a robust schedule of programs, teachings, and retreats. In the meantime, Drupal Rinpoche in Virginia will continue to lead practice, weekly practice and teachings via Zoom and Facebook live stream. It's our great wish to continue work on the Shrine Hall project so that our return to regular activities will include a new Shrine Hall and many wonderful opportunities it will present. Drang Nur will always make the precious Dharma accessible to anyone regardless of their financial situations. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask for your support. You can financially support the center at the donation page of the website with monthly or one-time donations, and you can earmark the donation for day-to-day expenses of running the center or for the new Shrine Hall project. Finally, I'd like to thank everyone who has financially supported the center and also everyone who has volunteered their time and hard work. The benefits of establishing, building, and operating Drang Nur are immeasurable. The vast merit we accumulate through contributing our hard work, financial resources, and skills towards the construction of the new Shrine Hall will benefit countless beings on their path to enlightenment. I would like to now open it up for anyone who has any questions about the new Shrine Hall project. And thank you again for participating in these wonderful teachings and practice.
Oh, thank you very much, Mark. That's very good.
You're welcome. Thank you, Drupan, for everything. Okay, well, no questions. It doesn't look like anybody has any questions. Thank you again, and we look forward to continuing this wonderful journey and with everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, so
Thank you.
I'm just now seeing that there's some things here in the chat box that I apologize we weren't able to see before.
Like people were mentioning that we might have missed verse 21.
Oh,
Over it by accident.
we missed 21? Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Which,
Duyon de chuta yo ba tongwa nang xin le wa.
all right, okay. Sorry.
So I guess we'll do that then next time.
Why don't we finish this one and then go back, Virginia, because we're already in the middle of it.
Right, yeah, so that makes sense, doesn't it? We'll finish 22 and then we'll go back to 21.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
And
Janelle,
yeah, I think, oh, go ahead, Damien.
that's okay, yeah. And Janelle also wanted to request prayers today for all the areas that are fighting wildfires in California, Colorado, and others, for the people, animals, forests, and firefighters, and for the successful control of the fires. And she was asking, how do we view the expanse of these uncontrolled wildflowers with so much suffering as a
Mm.
opening that up for as a question.
So young dua che jumirawa te gain sana me mambo barney tene di young pena dape nangwa yimpa nang singande che tukere tene young shinkam yimpa samyagi gande sam tukere to hola kirawa
아,
sam
네, 네.
juice
다시
pajero
다시 라인 방아. 군도 강고라. 디 고 텔레지 타기 공시원나 야고 요래 누고 요래 휴타로와. 멤버야디 고 야고 말이 다 티가고 메이나리 심견이나리 고 강게테 요로와. 티니다 조라 고모람 야가리 스티. 어쨌든 the relative truths ya yoroti ko maso tela ka to ya na tele ya bore sa yo maris.
So of course, you know, when it
yina
comes
yang ka sena ti tinita jiktini chungbare ya bore sam yo mare tina yang ko jikta da dubore sabe ko lo hyu chibo yo bi na ti yang so pen to ma ba ka sena ko me wa so to ko mare ne jik rang ga da da ji mo lam ya nga dang tili chi na ne pen to che yo re ma to bi ta ko 누구 시험지 차송 삼 심전도 충분히요. 되게 이제 그 매매와도 소통 말와.
So when it comes, first of all, thank you for your you know, for your request to hold that in our prayers. And also, you know, but when it comes to situations like these, of course, you know, from the perspective of the relative truth. So in the relative, as the relative truth manifests or appears, you know, in these variety of ways. Of course, you know, something like this with the wildfires is really tragic. You know, many sentient beings, it's, you know, causing a lot of suffering to many sentient beings. And so therefore, it really is something that you know, we can respond to with a sense of real compassion, and making aspiration prayers and, you know, saying prayers. So it's not like we can have sort of a pure perception that says, oh, you know, the wildfires are good. It's a pure Buddha field. Obviously, it's not like that. So there is, in these types of situations, the best response is one of compassion, you know, and also it is really effective to have prayers and aspiration that you know, that others may be relieved of this suffering. But so at the same time, you know, if we kind of become really sort of stuck in our kind of thought of this is really bad, this is really terrible, and really hang on to that, and then to the point where it really, you know, causes a lot of anxiety and lack of mental well-being, then obviously that also doesn't have any benefit. That doesn't cause the situation to get any better. So if we're really focused on how awful the situation is without actually generating, you know, we're bringing it into our practice, for instance, then it doesn't help the situation any, and it only just creates an unnecessary like distress on top of distress. So therefore, you know, it's important not to dwell with too much fixation on the negative with regard to these situations.
tin ji ta da song da nga su ji pa gi te me se ya na wo ji yu na te nga su ta ko se ya ta gi chi gres ro wa ki si ju ya yu na ten sam sang nga su ta ji pe nga su da wo ji ha ku yo re me ma no ha ku yo re ti na ya da nga su chi ya yo ma ro kan chi tu ma re se ya do kan chi ti ni ta te ji chi ma tho ya ta la te ne da sim te ma ji ne de gres sum do.
So, you know, if there's something we can do, you know, something we can do to actually help the situation, then by all means, you know, we should do what we can to be of benefit. But in many cases, there is nothing we can do. Like, for instance, in this situation of these fires, you know, we can't, you know, cause the fire to be put out, you know, any faster, you know, or ourselves. And so therefore, you know, often it is said, if there is nothing that can be done, then there isn't any benefit in having a lot of generating a lot of worry and concern. If there's nothing that can be done to remedy the situation. But if there is something that can be done, then we do what can be done. So what we can do in this situation is exactly what you have done, which is, make prayers and dedication. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you, Mark. It was wonderful.
Yes, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, and I'd also like to thank Damien. He was the one that put the slides together and kind of did this, controlled the slideshow. So he was also a part of putting together the presentation. But thank you.
Thank you, Damien. Great job. Thanks.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Damien. I love the pointer basket.
Wish that could be put up on the website, that presentation.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I was thinking the same thing. So we can discuss.
So we can talk about that. Yeah, we're gonna send out a newsletter soon with similar pictures and story, but we can think about putting it on the website. Sure.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
We might want to be cautious about letting the neighbors know we want to buy their property.
I thought about that too. Yeah.
Yeah, before the neighbor meeting said, "Oh, you extended, you guys extended."
Yes, want to take us over, which we do.
So actually, I'm also now. It looks like, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Aylin? Is that right, Aylin? And so I saw there was a question from you that came to us. It looks like it came just to Drongor. How do we apply this to situations? Would you like to say a little more about that, or do you?
Kind of like the situation of looking at. I understand that looking at in the positive light,
Mm-hmm.
But I was more inquiring in the particular situation, like for example, when somebody, when you realize that someone is not, let's say, it's not good for us anymore in our life, that you see that, it doesn't support our personal growth,
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you can decide to see, the positive on this person, but if there is a situation where there is no any good for you anymore, where can you apply that, I still, see the positive, but at the same time decide that it's not good anymore and depart. How, so how do you apply this concept, when it comes to situations in the personal perspective?
Kinsonge. Pena Garci mi check ngato tes nupa tangiyo na. Dine ngato Garci kongso yang de nyemba shira samlo matangne zangbo la samlo tango samna yang. Tadung pena ngato kongso nyamdu yona pinto mena. Dine nune chine chik china kongso ngato nupa tangiyo na. Dine yang de pena kakas chena la so de chikchina yagi yore yini yang ta dung tenda de chok zangbo la samla tangna pinto yore be gane chiko sare de
that jatan karsina ko relationship roate ko kharchi go te khaya chi mago we kecha khayo mare ko chi khari best way chi harwa yina yang ta nga so the problem, how to dealing the problem to karsina chi nga so negative side chi you hula tene nga so very difficult to handle. Tindi mind be thought negative some matane. Tindi in a koji ran latine power no young yours. Nupaji. Ti nupe thought dealing the problems. China this yabo yore. Ti indutine to cars rank it energy. Ti 에다 가서는 지 파르조 네게티브 트니 섬노 땅 마타나 트니 can handle chi to grace negative 섬노 땅 비비는 기 over power 차는 트니 지 원에 지는 how to do solution 라토 부요 말와
So yes, actually it is just as you say, when it comes to, you know, our relationships with others, when there is maybe an unhealthy relationship or something, you know, that is really problematic there, you know, of course we have to figure out what the best way to handle it is, or what the best course of action is, and how to deal with the problem. And sometimes, as you say, that problem, you know, dealing with it means maybe, you know, choosing something different, or, you know, not remaining in relation or in contact with that person. But you can still do that without really dwelling or fixating on the negative side. In fact, it's often better if we can do it without dwelling or fixating on the negative side, because actually we have better clarity in the situation in that way. And so we're actually able to handle it better. If we can still sort of hold the positive, or still see, you know, if we can sort of see the situation clearly without being completely overwhelmed with the negative, then we actually have more power. We have more power and ability to deal with the situation effectively and clearly. Whereas if we're just like completely fixated on the negative, then we become overpowered by our own afflictions, you know, or that own sort of negative perception. And then actually we don't handle it as skillfully. We're not able to handle the situation as skillfully. We're not able to actually often find the right solution. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah. So kind of like more like overweight the bad with the good, make your decisions, and at the same time, you know, look at whatever comes up positive out of the situation. Still.
Yeah,
absolutely, right.
Thank you.
Rita chatanga so jula ko ji karse gore ji parjo negi se samutang vi na tene ji hyokchenbo tang vi na chatang parjo ke chatang kari imba ta samsang ha ko mares
parjo kande
parjo ke ji complete no ji ngat ha ko tu mares tini nina ngatu jula tene ji this ji pure mind or yama, not pure mind, like basically not angry, you know, hatred. Then this ji go see the path, you know, solution.
So
right.
So if we, you know, if we are really overwhelmed by our own perception of the negative in a situation like that, then inevitably we're not seeing the whole picture. You know, we're not actually able to see the situation completely, you know, sort of all sides or all aspects of the situation. But if we have a pure mind, or he said actually not exactly a pure mind, but basically if we're not, you know, if we're not overwhelmed ourselves by anger or hatred, you know, then we're in a much better position. You know, we're coming from a clear-minded position from which we're actually able to find the best path or solution that isn't, you know, dictated or kind of affected by our anger. So we have a guest at the door, and so
thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye everyone. Have a great day.